John Daversa Podcast.
It lets you feel like music isn't all in the world that exists. It's not your only purpose of life. It's not the only thing that has value to you or that you have value for. But beyond that, if you can actually take another practice seriously, you can craft a relationship with practice that can reinfuse your music when you start getting jaded. Because I think the nature of practice is clarity and frustration sort of battling each other, right? So for me, whenever I'm feeling frustrated in one, I tend to have clarity in the other. And then once I have frustration there, I tend to have clarity in the other. And it's really formed this interesting sort of symbiosis that like I would not have seen coming, because for me, it was always this like random side thing that I did, but now has kind of become a fun sort of way to approach life.
This is my conversation with a very creative and open-minded being, Michael Mayo. And he's setting the world on fire with his music and his approach to life, and I hope you enjoy our discussion. Hello, Michael Mayo.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you here. The concert last night was amazing.
Thank you so much.
And I was telling you before, the smiles on the students' faces was everything, and to hear your artistry, live and in the room there, happening right there is really special, and it's just a real pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. This is great. It was a really fun show, and I'm glad that the students seemed to enjoy it. So yeah, it was a good time.
Oh, they did. They did. And hey, with our conversation here, I want to know. I'm going to ask you this question first.
Okay.
What you've got? There's so much innovation in your music. I've been listening to your music the last week. Just internalizing, and there's always a surprise, and there's always a fuse of this along with a fuse of that, and then your mastery of the instrument to be able to just subtly go in between those key shifts and the metric modulations, and you bringing jazz along with neo soul and hip hop and classical and like everything all together in a very genuine, organic way. So I can hear all those influences. It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
I want to inspire the people that are listening. So I want to know where does that passion come from? I know you come from a musical family.
Yep.
Give us a little bit of background for you, where all this music comes from.
Yeah, so I grew up in a musical family. Both my parents are musicians. My mom is a singer. My dad is a saxophone player, multi-instrumentalist. And I grew up watching them do their thing from a very young age. So I was going with them to rehearsals and shows and recording sessions and things like that. And so for me, the first job that I knew that someone could have was that of a professional musician, right? It was like there wasn't any... I think I'm very fortunate in that I never had to fight to imagine what a career in music could look like. It was always just like right there, two living examples. So that was a blessing. And for me, I always knew there was never any doubt that music was what I wanted to do when I grew up. Along the path, there's doubts about like, am I good enough? Can I make it happen, et cetera? But in terms of what I want, I always knew that this is what I wanted. And for me, the drive really boils down to just like a deep, genuine love of sound and the experience of sound and the experience of music. For me, it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. It never really gets old, because as soon as you think that you've heard all there is to hear, there's always another world that you've never even heard of before or considered. And I just really love to be able to travel the world and make music with people that I love, for people that I love, and also just be an experiencer of music, going to live shows, going to hear things, listening to new music. For me, it's very rewarding, and it kind of just like keeps my engine running.
Yeah. I can relate to what it is to have a musical family too. My dad was a session trumpet player, mostly in like late 60s until mid 80s. And my mom's a musician too. But I remember when people would come over for dinner, there's all these session players, and the conversations that I learned from, because they were always complaining about the conductor should have done this, and can you believe the arranger did that, and can you believe that person was behaving like that. And,
Yeah.
and actually, I don't know if you would relate to this. It actually taught me that it taught me a lot of the things that I wouldn't want to experience in music. And I realized, okay, that's one side of the business that I want to negotiate in a different way, but I want to really find my own way through this.
Yeah.
I want to find a way to be an artist through this, and still I can do the professional and commercial work, but on my own terms. I wonder if you had similar conversations at the dinner table, or how that may have affected you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There are certain parts of that I resonate with. I think the like sort of complaining about a particular gig or a particular session or whatever, that definitely does happen. And for me, it was more about, I don't know, I feel like I learned about professionalism through a lot of those conversations about sort of what you're saying about what not to do, right? You know, like show up on time and have good energy and be easy to work with. And, you know, and as I got older, the conversations became more about like knowing how to take a stand when need be, knowing how to sort of carve out your own space, knowing how to set boundaries, that sort of thing. In terms of like the musical direction, I don't know if when I was younger, if I had a specific genre of music that I was drawn to as much as just music in general. But then when I got to, and when I say when I'm younger, I mean like pre-high school. But then when I got to high school, I got into jazz, and you know everything changed. Then it was like the summer before I started high school, because I went to an art school in Los Angeles, and the summer before I started high school, my dad gave me Kind of Blue, and my granny, my mom's mom, gave me a giant Ella Fitzgerald best of compilation CD. So like suddenly at the age of 13, I had all this new music and I was like, oh my God, what is this? And it kind of just started me on a path that I think I'm still riding the wave of now. And I don't know if that's as much as like having a musical family as much as it is having a family that's into music. I feel like the fact that my parents are musicians has affected me greatly, but I think that could happen for anyone, regardless of like your parents' actual careers. If they're into music and they give you those resources, then it kind of like gets those juices flowing.
Yeah. So my dad gave me Kind of Blue probably about the same age, and my mom was always playing Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
You know, she had like every record ever.
Yeah.
That
We're the same.
is amazing. Yeah, kind of. I want to ask you about, can you give, as appropriate, some examples of those boundaries that you've had to define and those professional decisions that you've had to navigate?
Sure. Yeah, let me see if I can think of an example. I think in general, you know, making sure that people respect your time is big. And I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine recently about this. And he said something that I thought was quite insightful, which was basically, it's not 3 strikes, it's 2 strikes, right? Like if someone has shown you that they don't appreciate your time once, sometimes every now and then it's a fluke, right? Sometimes it's like, okay, like I know what it's like to be overwhelmed. Sometimes you literally just forget, and like I can have compassion for it that first time, but the second time it happens, it's like, okay, after I let it be known the first time that this was not okay, I would hope that you would put a bit more mental energy into like taking the care in the same way that I would if you came to me and said something wasn't okay. I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen again. And, you know, I think it's really important to know your worth, and to know that you do have, you do deserve for your time to be respected. But it's hard, you know, especially, you know, in our current situation, there's a lot of times where you feel like you have to do every single thing, especially younger folks, younger students, younger musicians. You feel like you have to do every single thing, take every single gig, and accept every single type of treatment if you want to survive, if you want to make it. But the fact is that's not really true, because sometimes if you set the tone of this is okay, I will accept this, then that sort of can snowball into worse and worse treatment. So I've had to learn how to, the moment I feel like something is going to become a pattern, just like have a conversation. And then after that conversation has been had, after it happens again, then bye. You know, not in a way that's gonna cause any sort of explosion, but just in a way that's like, all right, I don't really see the need for us to work together anymore, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah,
That's so true. It is 2 strikes. It really is.
it's 2 because I don't know. For me, 3 feels like 1 too many. Yeah,
I'm thinking about 1,000 different occasions right now.
Yeah.
That 3rd strike happened, and it should never have happened.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you for that. I was talking to somebody. It almost is a tangent to or adjacent to taking interviews too, because I feel like, especially when you're just getting started and you need anything and everything, there's that tendency to overextend.
Yep.
And please a little bit too far, and I always feel that visual analogy of actually overextending, so you have no grounding on your 2 feet, right? Because you're trying to grasp, you're trying to get over there, and when you're trying to get over there, well, you're not here anymore, and so all of a sudden you lose all your strength, and all of your vitality,
Yep.
and everything that you're so passionate about, and everything that you stand for, and everything that makes you great,
And kind of your sense of self.
yeah,
right?
exactly. And so then you have self-doubt.
Yeah.
So even in taking an interview or meeting somebody that you really respect, and you want something from them, they're going to feel that, and so they're going to repel you. So you have to just stand in your own integrity and your own self-value, as you're saying, and that there's a confidence of it, but like a real true confidence where you just know who you are.
Absolutely.
And however things are going to come in and whatever you're going to give is a natural thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I also think that one of the beauties of coming up in jazz is like the shed mentality, right? And it comes in a lot of different versions, right? There's sort of the toxic version of like shed at all costs and like practice no matter what. But I kind of think if we look at life as like a larger shed, right? If I'm considering, if I value finding that sense of self and like really learning who I am, knowing who I am, like grasping who I am, and I treat that like a shed, and like I value that as something to aspire to and something that is worth practicing towards, in the same way that like if I don't know my key signatures, but I want to know my key signatures, in the same way that I would like literally put in the groundwork to make learning my key signatures happen. I really think that sort of thing will come together a lot faster, and like the relationship you craft with it is going to be a lot healthier if you treat it as something valuable rather than something you can sort of like throw by the wayside. I think it's exceedingly important.
Yeah, in a way, in a certain perspective, nothing is isolated ever. Whenever you're working on fine details, the micro of the micro of the micro, you're also working on the macro, because it's just a different perspective of the same thing.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to someone in a conversation, you're also practicing an improvisation and how to flow and understand and balance and see what the music needs and what the sounds are. And if you're aware of that here, then you're going to be aware of it when you're making music.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Absolutely. It's like fractals, right? It's the same at every level.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So translate that for people that are listening. When you sang Giant Steps last night.
Yeah.
Holy goodness. I mean, it was amazing. And so when you're practicing that, how do you get into the detail, and you're obviously very detail oriented with all of your music. So how do you, and I'm also realizing, when I see you performing and delivering those things, I perceive, he loves practicing those little tiny things.
It's true. It's true.
So if you would just share a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So, it's funny, that arrangement literally began as a way to practice Giant Steps, because I had just moved to New York and all I had was clothes, a looper, a laptop, and a melodica. And
It sounds complete to me.
It sounds complete. It felt incomplete. So I think that I had a gig or something, and Giant Steps was one of the tunes. And I didn't want to give the band leader a chance to ask me if I felt comfortable soloing on it. And I had always wanted to learn how to solo on the tune. And I had like sort of taken stabs at it in college, but it was just always kind of nebulous and or terrifying. And so I created that arrangement as a way to practice. So I was like, I don't have a keyboard. Let me just make a loop.
Yeah.
Because at least that way I have something I can practice to, right? The process of internalizing giant steps changes for me was sort of I'm a big proponent of when something is difficult, identifying which parts of it actually are difficult and which parts of it are not actually difficult, right? So the example that I always use with giant steps is that the individual chords themselves are not actually hard to hear. Like most people, especially most people who are listening to jazz, grow up in jazz. If you play a minor 7 chord or a dominant chord or a major chord, because those are literally the only chords in the song, right? They're going to be able to improvise over the individual chords. The thing that gets difficult is transitioning, right? From chord A to chord B and from key center A to key center B. And so I always tell students, when you're learning a new tune and you're trying to internalize the changes, first go through the chart and circle any individual chords that are difficult. So for one person, might be a minor 7 flat 5 chord. For someone else, that might be an altered dominant chord, right? Or like a diminished chord. After you've done that, then go through and identify difficult transitions. And then once you find that difficult transition, create a two chord loop. And so for me, it was just those first 2 chords, B major 7, D7, B major 7, D7, B major 7, D7. And like, I wouldn't stop until I literally could hear ahead to what the next chord was going to sound like. So I play the B major 7, improvise for a while, stop, and then try to hear the D7 before it happens. And then sing an idea, and then play the chord and sing the same idea. If it works, great. If not, go back to the drawing board, right? And it's kind of a tedious way to go through it, but I found that through doing it that way, by the time I get to the end of the form, I've internalized all the changes. And like when I think about changes, I think sometimes we think of changes just as like chords, but for me, changes are that which changes, right? Like when we're talking about voice leading, there are the notes that stay from chord A to chord B, and then there are the notes that change. For me, changes are really thinking about like, what is it that is actually changing? Let me identify that with my ear, and then let me sort of describe that in the lines that I'm singing. And so I think giant steps is like a lot more approachable than people give it credit for, because it's actually a very tonal piece. But I think because of the legacy of John Coltrane and because of the amazing solos that he's taken over that song and Coltrane changes in general, and because of all the hype that we've given the song, people can view it as this like giant, epic, mega scary thing. But, you know, singers don't have buttons, right? And I think for a lot of folks that can feel like a limiting factor, but for me, it's actually proven to be kind of a superpower if we allow it to be a superpower. So I think you really have to, again, identify the things that are hard, the things that are easy, target the things that are hard, and work at them until they're easy. Like it really comes down to, it boils down to that, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah, those little small isolated details.
Yeah.
And focus on the things that you can make better.
Totally.
You started that with a little bit of a sting with I wanted to make sure that the band leader didn't ask me if I was comfortable or not to sing giant steps. So, and I think, would you say that that's a bias, between instrumentalists and vocalists?
Oh, 100%.
So, that's what I'm getting at. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your experience with that and how you've completely destroyed that for everybody.
Yeah. So,
or at least for yourself.
Sure. I mean, I make no secret about the fact that I spent a long time with a chip on my shoulder about being a singer in like an instrumental world. And, it's a thing that I internalize, and I know talking to peers and teachers and students, especially, that a lot of singers internalize this idea, whether or not they are aware of it, that we put instrumentalists above singers.
In what way?
And so in terms of improvisational ability, in terms of being able to hear things, in terms of being able to solo over particular changes, or play certain types of lines. And I internalized that, but I also rebelled against that from around the time I was in high school. I had a teacher who shall remain nameless in high school who, this was right when I was getting into jazz. I didn't really know what I was doing. I had barely started doing any sort of ear training work. And in around that time, I was taking a solo on a song and I tried to do sort of like a faster 16th note line without really knowing what I was doing. I was just having fun. And then the teacher had this habit of, and this is bad, like this is not good teaching. The teacher had this habit of, as soon as we would stop playing, they would go around and tell every single person in the band what they did wrong in like a very pointed way, like making direct eye contact. It was a whole thing. And when they got to me, they saved me for last. They're like, Michael, nobody wants to hear a singer sing 16th notes. I never want to hear you do that again. Just what? Yeah. And like, thankfully, I was the sort of student that, when I heard that, it made me want to prove them wrong. Mm-hmm. But that's something that I kind of came pre-programmed with, and that's not going to be the case for everyone, right? And so, like, this isn't a message to say that, like, you just have to ignore that type of treatment and just get over it. It's like, that wasn't okay. I didn't have the language to sort of speak up and say that's not okay, but internally I was like, I don't like that. I'm going to prove this guy wrong. And so for a long time, I sort of had this chip on my shoulder of like, I have to prove the instrumentalists wrong, that singers can't do stuff. I have to prove them wrong that a singer can't solo over giant steps, or a singer can't sing 16th notes, or can't do yada, yada, yada. And like, in a way, that mentality sort of helped me in terms of the drive to practice. But in another way, that mentality definitely hurt me in the way that I sort of felt about myself. It took me a long time to really feel as a singer that it's okay to just be a singer, right? Oh. Not in the sense of like, I thought it wasn't okay to be a singer, but in the sense of being a singer feels like you're lacking something. Right.
You're proving yourself.
You're proving here. Like you have to prove yourself at all times, which like isn't true. And I think like is not, the road to mental health is not paved with that mentality. You know what I mean? Yeah. So one of the things I'm really passionate about in talking with students is like really talking about the mental game side of things, because I never really had anyone talk to me about that sort of stuff. And I sort of had to cut through the weeds in the wilderness by myself to figure that out. And now I've reached a point where I feel like pretty settled in that respect. But yeah, I mean, I think that feeling of needing to prove yourself, if harnessed well, can lead to fruitful practice. But I think that there are other pathways there that like don't involve as much sort of shame and fear. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but even listening to you last night, it was really clear to me that you can connect to the song and deliver the song. You're not afraid to do that, to just connect with the lyrics and the song and just be what that needs to be for that moment. And then you also happen to have all of this really sophisticated language and vocabulary that you can draw upon whenever you hear it. But you're not showing it, you're just using it. That's why it feels complete, because you've gone through all of this work to put those two sides together.
Thank you. I mean, thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that. It's definitely a constant, it's an ongoing thing, because it's like, you never know, the voice has moods, right? So like, sophisticated lady in F might feel totally normal on Saturday, but then on Monday it feels totally wrong and bad. Yeah. And I think in the same way that the voice has moods, the sort of like musical self has moods too, right? Like you can feel totally good soloing over a song, or like playing with a certain band, or playing a gig at your favorite place one day, but then feel totally different the next time. And I feel like the routine of showing up for yourself is going to be the through line that makes you feel as good as possible, as often as possible.
I've always loved that saying, you can't step in the same river twice.
I like that.
Even if it's the same song, the same place, the same situation, the moment is different.
Totally.
So it's just going to be different.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to share with you, because I saw John Clayton a couple weeks ago, and I was laughing with him because I remember because of your story about the teacher that said,
Oh, yeah.
here are the things that you did wrong.
Yeah.
And one time I remember him coming to do a clinic. I love John Clayton to death. Like he's just pure joy.
Truly,
to me.
he's such a great guy.
And the band played and like he finally, like he'd been working with them for a little bit and they sounded so great. They went from here to like there.
Yeah.
And he stopped the band and he said, I just want to stop you all because I know usually people stop and they want to tell you what was wrong.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you that was great.
Hey.
So remember that feeling.
Yeah.
Remember that feeling. Now let's go again.
Love that.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. That's the way.
Yeah.
That's the way.
But I mean, you can still, push and inspire people to be better, of course. But when you're in a receptive place, then you're going to go a lot further with it.
Totally. And it's also like there's a difference between giving constructive notes. Like at letter F, give it a bit more energy, or like watch out for that chord here. I think you played this. Notice that it's this, right? The spirit of that is different than like every time we do this, you sound like a thing that I don't want to hear and it makes me sad inside and I never want to hear you play. It's like, it's a different spirit, right? And students can really, and people in general can really pick up on that. When you're in a rehearsal, I feel like the difference in vibe is how the band leader is addressing the things that need addressing. It's not because it's like the things that are going to need to be addressed are usually the same, but how you address it like makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. So mentors. You've had some pretty incredible mentors.
It's true.
In your life. You want to speak to any of these incredible human beings that shaped your sounds?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
Maybe even starting with your time at the Thelonious Monk Herbie Hancock Institute.
Yeah. So, I was at the now Herbie Hancock Institute for 2 years, and we had a lot of people come in and out of there. Basically, the way that it works is a couple times a month or every few months, you'll get an artist in residence who comes for a week, and you're sort of theirs for the week, and they take you through their own musical philosophy. And I think it's kind of cool because as the students, you are sort of the stationary party, and then people are sort of shuffling in and out of your space, and you can sort of take what you like from their philosophies, their mentalities. I mean, Herbie Hancock, like, is at the top of the list, obviously, right? Getting to work with Herbie, getting to work with Wayne Shorter is like, especially now, such an honor. And it was an honor then, but now it's like even more of an honor, right? These are two musicians who have literally changed the world of music, right? I think one of the things that when I think of Herbie, there's so many things, but off the top, one of the things I think of with Herbie is sort of being on the forefront of like musical innovation and sort of being in line with new technologies, right? And I found Herbie's Sunlight album in college, and I was like, what? Like, what? I had heard, I think what did it, I had a friend who did a cover of Come Running to Me. And I was like, this song is amazing. She sounds amazing. And she told me it was a Herbie Hancock cover. And I'm like, okay, let me go listen to the original. And then I listened to the whole Sunlight album. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And this is before I even got to the Institute. And, he has this sort of mesmerizing ability to be able to transform the sound of music through ways that, like, on their face are kind of simple, right? Even when he's just playing a piano, like he sits down and plays, and he plays a couple notes and you can tell that it's him because somehow he just makes the piano instrument sound unique. Something about his touch. And so I think from working with him, I was really able to start thinking about how to incorporate technology into my own music. I started getting really into the looper pedal. And then beyond that, sort of how to just think bigger, right? Like how to try to be a bit more boundless in the way that I think about composition and musical expression. And I would say that Wayne ties into that as well. When I think of Wayne, I think of Galaxy Brain, right? One of the things we did with Wayne is we watched this movie, The Langoliers, which is a Stephen King novel, I believe, that was sort of made into a 3-part TV movie series. And basically the premise of the movie, not to go into too much detail, is there's this group of people that are on an airplane, and then while they're on the plane, they go through this like portal thing, and then they land in this world that's kind of gray, where the food doesn't taste like anything, and there isn't any smell, and everything's kind of stale, and there aren't really any people around, and they're like, what's going on here? And then they start hearing this like distant shrieking. And, you know, the movie progresses, and later on we learn that the shrieking is caused by these creatures called Langoliers, which eat the past. They had gone through that portal and landed a day in the past. And the Langoliers are there to sort of eat the past so that the present can like flourish or something. Long story short, at one point, all these people are running away from these creatures that are trying to eat them. And they're running to the plane. And everybody's getting on the plane. And there's this one guy who is like just looking at these creatures from far away and is sort of paralyzed in fear. And the creature comes and just like gobbles him up. And Wayne pauses the movie. He's like, that. And we're like, what? He's like, that. That's what I want music to sound like. What? Like, what? I'm like 23 and I'm like, what? And it's that sort of thing that, you know, really makes you think. A man who has made all the sort of transcendent, I mean, you know, the transcendent that he spent his whole life making music, can really zoom in on a movie like that and identify a feeling and say that that's what I want music to sound like. That took me out for a long time. I was like, man, this is deep. I want to engage in music in a way that makes me feel like I can sort of take a snapshot of any moment, any feeling, any taste, any sound, any conversation, and translate it into something musical. Mm-hmm. And like working with Wayne and Herbie really sort of put that in the forefront of my mind at that time.
I would think that it feels like whenever you create and make music, that they must be just sitting right here with you, you know?
I mean, I hope so. It definitely feels that way. And every time I remember things like that, it sort of reinfuses, you know, because we fall into these routines, right? Mm. But every time I remember moments like that, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's so much more. There's always so much more. I think that's underneath it all, that's the lesson. It's like there's always so much more, regardless of how much you've done, how much you think there is, even regardless of where your mentality is or what you're feeling, there's always so much more.
Mm-hmm. And then more.
And then more. It never stops.
I remember it was the very first class of the Thelonious Monk Institute when they were just getting going. And
that's when I was at NEC, right? In New England?
I don't know. I mean, this was like mid 90s.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and I auditioned for it, and I went in, and Wayne was there, and I think Terrence was there, and it's totally fuzzy for me now.
Yeah.
But I remember Wayne was there, and I had this red trumpet, a la Miles Davis at that time.
Yeah.
An old Martin Committee that was red with the gold, etching on it and everything. And so I walked in, and we were supposed to play around midnight, and I forget what else. And I walked in, and he said, like very seriously, he said, "That's my trumpet." And I was like, "Oh yeah,
yeah."
And he said, "That's my trumpet." And I had no idea what to do, and he just had me in his palm.
Yeah.
And I wish I could go back to the past.
Yeah,
I wish I could go back and just give him the trumpet. Like, it's yours.
You can have
Mr.
it.
Shorter. Yeah, like it was one of those moments that just freezes for me.
Yeah. That's so funny. And he knew he had you too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he knew.
Just the first step I came in the door.
Yeah.
And, I was also curious about how Herbie Hancock has inspired the use of technology and the loop pedals and all of that, and to think bigger.
Yeah.
Do you think that he has, did he see that about you in particular, or does he have do you see him having a different message or different inspiration for different students?
I mean, the technology thing I think was sort of to the class in general, because he saw me use the looper on my recital, but I wasn't really using it in the group yet because I was still new to it. Like the first time I ever used a looper was my senior year of undergrad, and then I didn't really use it again until halfway through the institute. And it was the conversations with Herbie that inspired me to use it, but I was still a little bit nervous to like compose with it for the group. So I didn't really use it until I used it on one song on my graduate recital at the institute, and then after I graduated was really when I started using it for real. So I think that his advice wasn't to me specifically because he didn't really even know that I was using the looper yet, but it was to the whole group, and I sort of took that and used that as inspiration.
I see. Okay, I've got a couple more things for you.
Bring it.
I want you to share with everybody. Like, let me frame it this way.
Okay.
What musics do you think most define who you are as an artist? It's not exactly who you are, but have inspired and shaped who you are. If those desert island places that there's a lot of music that inspires us, but if you can really filter it into something that's really, really direct.
Are you thinking more genre titles or like people? Yeah, I mean, there's so many people.
Right.
I think in terms of singing, okay. In terms of singing, the people that come to mind in no particular order, Ella Fitzgerald, Bobby McFerrin, Sarah Vaughan, Donny Hathaway, Brandy, D'Angelo, Luther Vandross, Aretha Franklin, right? These are all the people that I grew up with, right? Some of the more jazz people came into my life around high school a little bit before, but, my parents were listening to Motown, gospel, R&B, blues. So I got a lot of that influence growing up.
Who are the Motown folks?
Yeah, I mean, Stevie Wonder, Jackson 5, Michael Jackson, Four Tops, like
Smokey,
Supremes. I mean, the list goes on and on. In terms of composition, some people that come to mind are Gerald Clayton, Herbie, Tigran Hamasyan, Wayne Shorter. I mean, I started writing in high school, but I didn't really feel like I had a sort of compositional voice until college, until undergrad. I didn't even really know what writing a tune felt like in a sort of like in an initiative sense. It was more of like, I'm just gonna sit down at the piano and play some chords and maybe sing a melody on top of it, but just because I feel like this is something I should do more than I sort of am hearing what I want and I'm just trying to find it. That sort of started for me in college, and that was around the time that I really started listening to the people that I mentioned. But yeah, like there have been pivotal records for me that kind of shifted things. I mean, when I heard Bobby McFerrin's The Voice I think that was my senior year of undergrad, that literally changed everything. Everything. I was, I had heard of Bobby McFerrin before, but I think the only thing I had heard was Blackbird, which is amazing. But at the time that I heard it, I wasn't quite mature enough to really get how amazing it was. I was like, oh yeah, this is a Blackbird thing. Right. But then when I heard The Voice, it like put it on like full display for me, what the human voice is actually capable of. Yeah. So, there's so many people, same thing when I heard Voodoo, D'Angelo the first time, same sort of thing, absolutely changed the game. When I heard Tigran Hamasyan, Red Hail, I heard that when I was 16 or 17, changed the game, like completely changed the game. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer, but there's so many things that we could talk about.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, but that gives a little snapshot you
Yeah.
know, like where those things are coming from.
Yeah.
You know, I even hear like I wonder if there's some Gretchen Parlato.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know.
totally.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, In a Dream
That-
was
yeah.
on heavy rotation. Yeah, I mean, and like Sarah Vaughan at Mr. Kelly's, her live record, like similarly changed the game, right? There's so many pivotal things, and there's still pivotal things, right? Like, I never want to get to a point where I can no longer be inspired by music, because at that point you've like lost the battle.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. You know, just being older, I can speak to that a little bit because it's happened to me twice. And I never thought it could even be possible.
Yeah.
You know, just whatever happens to the psyche, different things.
Sure.
And like that I've experienced that light going out and it's like so weird.
Yeah.
It's so weird. And then
Freaky.
you have to figure out, all I had to figure out was I had to surround myself with people that were just vital.
Yeah.
And that were so creative and had that spark. And then almost just by entrainment, you know, just by being in that frequency, it brought me back up and then I could start to hear it again.
Yeah.
You know, it's really beautiful to have experienced that actually. It was a really dark thing, but then, wow, to be able to come out of it
Yeah.
is incredibly empowering too.
Totally. I mean, I can definitely relate because for me that was COVID.
Really?
Yeah, for me it was like.
But didn't you? I mean, Bones came out right after that, right? Weren't you
Bones
like
came
in
out
that?
in 2021.
So,
But
when
that
were
was all. It was all recorded. I recorded everything before the pandemic.
Oh,
Yeah, it was all finished.
Wow.
We recorded in 2019, finished mixing, in 2019, mixing and mastering, and then COVID happened.
No kidding.
And
Because
then
on
we
the
put it out in
surface, you see the year 2021. Okay,
Right, so it makes
he
you
went.
think-
He went in the cave and like.
Nope. Nope. Yeah, I mean, and that time, and I'm sure we can all relate. Like, it was very hard, but also very clarifying. I think I made a lot more music than I listened to during that time. I didn't really feel much of a desire to listen to music, but I did feel a lot of desire to like make stuff, to just like go in the cave and make random stuff. I got into like Twitch and streaming game stuff, and so I was making new kinds of music that I had never really gotten into before. But whenever I was like, let me listen to something, I was kind of met with like a blah response. Yeah.
So how does your gaming life affect your music life?
Thank you for giving me a platform to speak on this.
Go.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So I'm a gamer. I've spent a lot of time playing games. There's one particular game. I play Super Smash Bros. Melee for the Nintendo GameCube, and I like compete. I go to tournaments. It's a whole thing. And my relationship with that game has kind of grown and shifted over the past couple years because I've always been into it. But I took some time off, and then when COVID happened, I got back into it. And it's interesting because it's kind of become my shed outside of music. And the more that I allow myself to engage with that, the more clarified my actual relationship with practice gets. Because sometimes with music, when I'm trying to figure out how I feel about practice or like analyzing my relationship with practice, because it's loaded, because it's also my livelihood, right? Sometimes the conversations that I have with myself can get a little bit bogged down by very specific, like, okay, I got to practice for the gig, or I have to get ready for the tour, or I have to get ready to go into the studio or whatever. But with the game, because I'm not financially invested in it, I can like actually shed and learn about my relationship with practice. So case in point, while I was still living in New York, I had a piano trio that I was playing piano in. And it was the first time I'd ever done that because piano is not my primary instrument, and I was very nervous. And I was playing with two of my very close friends who are a bass player and piano player respectively, and they were playing their primary instrument. So I was kind of the only one who was like, hey guys, do you mind playing my dumb little tunes with me on my dumb little hands? That's what my inner voice sounds like. Anyway, long story short, we booked our first gig at a place in New York that was kind of a fancy place in my estimation. And I was so nervous. Like I was nervous in a way that I never get for singing. Because I was like, I don't know, I feel like I'm always making mistakes. I feel like whenever I go to play something, it's not quite what I'm hearing. And then I start judging myself, and then it just goes blah, 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 blah. The day before our show, I go to a tournament for the game. And I was talking about the game with another gamer friend of mine. And I'm like, I don't know, I feel like when I'm in tournament, I'm like micromanaging my hands, and I feel like I can't actually like manifest the gameplay that I can see in my head. It's like my hands aren't doing it. And my friend said, okay, well, why don't you stop trying to micromanage your hands? Trust in the practice that you've done. Trust in the time that you've spent. Let your hands and your fingers do what they're going to do, and just like gently steer with your conscious mind. Boom. Hit me like a rock, a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh my God, piano immediately. And then the next day we had our show. And first of all, that night at the tournament, I played like shit, which is funny. But the next night at the show with the piano trio, I played better than I've ever played because of the clarity that I got from the game. And, and this is something that I talk with students about now. It's like, I think having a practice outside of music is really helpful. One, because it helps you be a bit detached, and like it lets you feel like music isn't all in the world that exists. It's not your only purpose of life. It's not the only thing that has value to you or that you have value for. But beyond that, if you can actually take another practice seriously, you can craft a relationship with practice that can reinfuse your music when you start getting jaded. Because I think the nature of practice is clarity and frustration sort of battling each other, right? So for me, whenever I'm feeling frustrated in one, I tend to have clarity in the other. And then once I have frustration there, I tend to have clarity in the other. And it's really formed this interesting sort of symbiosis that like I would not have seen coming, because for me, it was always this like random side thing that I did, but now has kind of become a fun sort of way to approach life.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's a lot of sense. It's kind of that Luke Skywalker used the Force moment.
Sure.
Yeah. You know what? It's a little bit more closely related because it's still music, but it's been so liberating for me to get a guitar. I always played bass, a little bit, so I can do that. But the guitar has that mystery B string, that's like, why is that a third and all the other ones
are fourths, yeah.
And so I can play the guitar, and I have no idea what these notes are. Yet I can still find some things, and
totally.
And the pressure's off because I don't play the guitar, and I can find these things like a 5-year-old.
Totally.
I can explore like a child.
Yeah.
And it always brings me back.
Yeah.
In a different way. Just finding those different ways to spark getting you to the same place.
Absolutely. And I guess actually, yeah, I should amend the statement. Having a practice that isn't your main thing can definitely be within music. I had a teacher in college who had us do this thing where she gave us an instrument that we didn't play. And I think she gave us like a week, if I'm remembering correctly. It was either like a week or 4 or 5 days.
That's great.
Where she's like, write a piece of music on an instrument that you don't play and try to find a sense of musicality. Like make it feel as musical as you can within your technical limitations. And the pieces that people wrote were amazing, because it's like the limitation of that sort of affords you a type of freedom that when you're with your main instrument can be harder to find because of all the investment that you've put into it. It's definitely possible to find because we've all found it, but like sometimes it can be easier when you don't actually have the chops. Sure. It's weird.
Oh, I'm assigning that on Tuesday.
Yeah, great.
That's it.
Let me know how it goes.
I will. It'll be amazing. So what are you working on now? What's coming up for you? What's the next path of creation for you?
Yeah. So I just finished recording my second album. It doesn't have a name yet, but that should hopefully be out later this year. And I'm really excited about it. It's a very different sound than my last album. It's a bit more live, a bit less electronic, more acoustic elements, fewer background vocals, but I do have kind of a pathological need to put background layers on things. Yeah. So there are still background vocals. But yeah, it's kind of a different sound. And so right now I'm in the process of, adding layers, subtracting layers, sort of crafting it into the sounds that I want it to have. But I'm producing it myself, and it's been an interesting sort of new journey for me. And the band is really great. It's Nate Smith, Linda O, and Shy Maestro.
Oh, great.
It's just a crazy, wild band. I can't believe everybody was free. But yeah, that's sort of my main thing right now. And apart from that, I just moved back home to Los Angeles, and so I'm sort of getting to know the scene there. And with those two things, it's kind of taking up all my time.
Right. Yeah, we were just talking about that. What I was going to share is that, I lived in LA for so long, and then I was gone. I was doing a show in Europe for about 3 years or so. And then when I came back, I called everybody and said, hey, I'm back. I'm ready to tackle everything again. Let's go. And they're like, oh, that's so great that you're back in town.
Yeah.
And then just like radio silence.
Oops.
Because everybody else, in terms of work,
Yeah.
everybody moved on with what was going on. And I couldn't
Slot
step
right
in the
back
same
in.
river twice.
Yeah.
And so I had to actually create new relationships and new musical collaborations.
Yep.
And it's like that moment where you're back in the place that and your home.
Yep.
Yet you're having to completely redefine your life and your work existence.
Totally. It's the same sort of thing for me. And I'm kind of freshly there. I moved a few months ago, and I've been touring a lot since I moved, so I haven't even really been there a lot. So a lot of people don't even know that I'm back. So I, just like you said, I'm kind of having to craft not necessarily new relationships, but like a new relationship to the city, and to the scene. So yeah, I'm excited for that though. It's definitely proving to be interesting. And it's also like the wheel keeps on turning when you're gone. And so it's cool to go back and see my friends, we were all students together, and now they have like beautiful, flourishing careers.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to be like, you want to call me for a gig sometime?
Well, tell them hello from me.
Yes, I will.
Hey, so how can people best follow you and check out and stay tuned for the album coming out?
Yep.
And where do they find you?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, michaelmayomusic.com, I have all my stuff there. I'm also on social media, though. Instagram is the one I'm most active on, so that's just at the Michael Mayo. And that's my tag in all the social media spaces, so you can find me there. And I'm always posting like random videos, random things of me singing in stairwells and random things. Yeah, so yeah.
Good. Michael, thank you so much.
My pleasure, John. Thank you for having me. This was
carving
great.
out the space here.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Wish you so well.
Thank you.
Go share that music, inspire everybody to make their music and elevate.
Keep going. We're all gonna keep going.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Much gratitude, everyone, for checking out the podcast. Please just subscribe and follow and like and add a comment, as it really helps us expand and grow and keep us all connected together. So I appreciate it very much, and I send you much, much, much love. I'll see you on the next one.